Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham City, hard plus difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is going to be the return to the steel mill and the fight against fake Joker. And along the way, I will also be completing the identity theft side mission, Deadshot's side mission, Bane's side mission, and Mad Hatter's side mission. And currently right now, we are trying to rescue Vicky Vale, and we just need to take out these 4 snipers. You'll want to immediately do Mad Hatter's side mission if you are even caring about the side missions at this point, because when you do Mad Hatter's side mission, you're pretty much in a position where you're right near the 3rd victim of the identity thief. So that is why you'll want to do it like that, and that's definitely the best route I can recommend if you've been contributing to the identity theft side mission and you've been following this walkthrough. But this part of the game, the return to the steel mill and that fight against fake Joker, I struggle so much with actually getting any consistency with that fight. That fight, because of the number of different enemy types that you're dealing with, and the number of different weapons that the enemies have, and you're dealing with the one-armed lieutenant and the Titan henchman, and you're also dealing with bumper cars that just come out of nowhere, and they're indicated by red pots, and you've got to avoid those so that you don't get hit. Because of the number of factors that just make that fight very, very obnoxious and not so consistent, I had to restart that encounter so many times. And the thing is with this video, the fight that you're going to see when I encounter fake Joker is actually recorded after I did this walkthrough. Because I actually learned a couple of new things about how best to deal with the one-armed lieutenants. And I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. But I definitely find the best way to deal with the one-armed lieutenants whenever they're mixed together with other normal enemies is to use the bat swarm on them. So you basically build up your combo by doing the beatdown on the one-armed lieutenants, then you initiate the bat swarm, and then repeat the process. The only problem is, because of how cumbersome the enemy prioritization system is in the Batman Arkham series, at times you'll try to attack the one-armed lieutenant after you do the bat swarm, and Batman prioritizes other enemies. And it can be very obnoxious, and there's no telling what kind of animation Batman chooses to do when he's trying to do the strike animation on the one-armed lieutenant, or when he's doing a strike animation on a normal henchman. And I do find the best way to sort of counteract this, but at times it still doesn't work, is to use the cape stun. And I did have one moment where, even though I was contributing to my combo by doing the cape stun after the bat swarm, I lost my combo for no reason. I mean, it's probably just a rare issue with the game, or really it's an issue that happens a lot in the Arkham games, where you're trying to do an action to contribute to your combo, but I guess because of the sequence of attacks that you used and the pattern that you use them in, sometimes that pattern can just cancel out the combo. So I guess in certain situations, based on what I noticed, if you use the cape stun after the bat swarm, at times your combo just drops for no reason because Batman doesn't do the long-range cape stun on an enemy. And it was stuff like that that was really making that encounter rather obnoxious. But to go back to what I was saying, I find the best way to deal with the one-armed lieutenant is to use the bat swarm and then build your combo up to the bat swarm again, keep using it, and you'll not only stun the one-armed lieutenant, but you'll also stun any other henchmen as well. And you haven't been seeing me use the bat swarm that much because I don't really find it to be that useful of an ability. I mean, if you're out of range and enemies aren't near you, the bat swarm can be a nice substitute. But other than that, I haven't found a lot of utility for it, aside from what I've just discovered with the one-armed lieutenant. And, I wasn't using the bat swarm originally on the original recording of that section, which is why I was getting so many moments where the game would just betray me. And after I did this walkthrough, I actually went through New Game Plus again to get back to that point. And I've saved a couple more video clips that I'll be putting into my annoying/dumb/weird moments in the Batman Arkham series video series. And that fight is definitely getting a lot of video clips for sure. Because I want to like the fight, but at the same time, it's hard for me to like it because of the number of problems I was encountering because of the game. The game was just screwing me out of a really fun encounter because of the problems I was encountering with the fundamental designs and with the certain utilization and mix-ups of certain enemy types. And the times when Batman would just prioritize the wrong guy, or I would just lose my combo for no reason, or I just get hit by Phantom Range, I need to talk about that fight when I get the chance. Like when we get to the steel mill, that's when I'll talk about it a lot more. Because I think it's best I reserve those tangents for that part when the time arises. But right now, this is the cure drop-off point for initiating Mad Hatter's side mission. So somehow, Mad Hatter used a remote hypnotic suggestion to get Batman to believe that the cure for the Titan disease was made, and that the drop-off point is right over here, when it actually isn't. It's not really demonstrated properly. All we see is Mad Hatter just like putting his hat on, and then somehow he used the remote hypnotic suggestion to get Batman to believe this, and it's rather confusing. I'm not too sure why he has this ability. You know, I don't think Mad Hatter's abilities are really demonstrated that well, and at times it feels a little supernatural. Like, if we actually had a better background with Mad Hatter's character and with how his abilities worked, it would have made a lot more sense, and I wouldn't be so critical of it. But that's just a thing that a lot of developers try to use with their villains. They try to use a lot of vague details to amplify the tension generated by these villains and to really make them seem like these supernatural entities or just enemies that you should be fearing. It's like when you hear all these things about, oh, I don't want to know the identity of this villain, and I want the mystique of this villain to remain intact, because I want to preserve that intimidation factor with these villains. And I never like it when, you know, like TV shows or games try to mythologize certain villains like that. And, you know, like, I watched Criminal Minds, and Criminal Minds actually touched upon this point as well. You know, like, when the police are naming the serial killers that the FBI is dealing with, you know, they constantly tell the police, don't name these serial killers. It'll mythologize them, and it'll give them more incentive to go out into the community and kill more people. And then you have the media just partaking in that whole system of naming the serial killer. And, you know, that's why the media is oftentimes a detrimental factor to consider when it comes to the FBI trying to deal with serial killers. And I'm guessing Rocksteady tried to favor the exact same kind of model with Mad Hatter to make him seem a lot more intimidating than he is by giving him all these abilities that don't really make any sense, and they're never properly demonstrated, so it's almost like he has supernatural abilities. And I'm not a big fan of it, really. You know, if you have to use such vague details and just mystique, and like really cheap mystique like that to make your villain intimidating, that's pretty much the equivalent to smoke and mirrors, like what you'd be getting in old school survival horror games. It's like in the older Resident Evil games where you have the fixed camera angle and you have like all these other cheap advantages that the enemies have to make them feign lethality, to make them seem a lot more dangerous than they actually are. And that's just a great example of smoke and mirror aspects. And then you have jump scares contributing to that. And then you have these interesting choices of cinematography that just add more to that smoke and mirror aspect. And it just completely delivers a false sense to what this BOW is. At least with Batman, he does use smoke and mirrors. He does use these sort of methods to make the criminals who are superstitious and cowardly lot believe that he is a supernatural entity. But because you're actually witnessing how he's doing them, you're not bringing up the whole question of, is just this there just to mythologize this guy, to give him all these kind of stupid abilities that just don't make any sense? No, because it's actually demonstrated in a real format, and you come to respect Batman a lot more, and you come to respect the fact that he is an individual with no sort of powers whatsoever, yet he's able to come across as being a supernatural entity, and the criminals who are a superstitious and cowardly lot. I mean, that's what he was trained to do when he was traveling the world before officially becoming Batman. And slowly that whole mythology is fading away as his crime-fighting career progresses, because criminals are getting very wise to his tactics. But he's still pretty efficient nonetheless. And, you know, that's a great example of smoke and mirrors done right, but smoke and mirrors done wrong with Mad Hatter. And that's how I feel about him. And that's just how I feel about this whole writing decision to mythologize villains, to try to make them seem somehow unique to other villains in that same universe. Like, just trying to make this one serial killer far more special than any other serial killer, or trying to make this one criminal seem far above the rest when it comes to his capabilities, when that's not actually true. There's no real distinction to be made right there. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that particular tangent. But we just done Mad Hatter's side mission, and right now, you'll notice that there's Bleach right there. That means that the third identity theft victim has spawned, and I'm trying to find him, because I recall I was in this area and I actually saw a body on the ground in detective vision. but I'm trying to move around a bit, trying to find him, and I end up stumbling into Azrael on accident. So I end up getting some XP, but I'm not doing Azrael's side mission in this walkthrough. And I find the identity theft victim right here, and Deadshot's victim has been located. So yeah, a lot of side missions really unlock after Mr. Freeze's boss fight. Of course, that's assuming you've been contributing to the side missions prior to Mr. Freeze's boss fight. But I'm just going to go on a different tangent, and I'm going to talk about a comment somebody left in the previous part of this walkthrough. It's the part of the walkthrough where I was dealing with Ra's al Ghul and Mr. Freeze. But in that video, I was talking about the cheap shortcut in storytelling that Batman Arkham Knight tried to do, where they tried to include Joker by saying that apparently in these people that have Joker's Titan-infected blood, his consciousness was manifesting. And that's why Batman can see him in Batman Arkham Knight. And, I mean, this is also amplified by the fear toxin, and I'm guessing Batman was just a lot more resilient to the Titan-infected blood, but the fear toxin diminished that resilience a bit, which is why he can see Joker immediately in Ace Chemicals. But regardless, the game really wants you to assume that it's the Titan-infected blood that Joker transferred out to every emergency room in Gotham for weeks during the events of Arkham City that is contributing to his consciousness manifesting in these individuals. And this person that left the comment tried to challenge that. And, you know, based on the way he phrased his statement, I don't know if the guy was trying to be a real jerk about it, or he's trying to put himself above me, or maybe it's just that he doesn't know English, or like he doesn't understand the basic framework for how you phrase certain comments to actually come across as friendly, but at the same time, you're trying to prove a point. Or maybe it's just he's phrasing his comment as a way to compliment how I felt about the whole issue with that cheap shortcut in storytelling. And so when he saw how I demonstrated my tone of voice, he probably thought he could express the same kind of tone of voice, and that's really how it comes across. But this is what he said. It's pretty obvious. That's right, he starts out with pretty obvious that Joker's mind isn't transferred. It's Crane's toxin that's making him think he might become like the Joker if he kills, and that's his biggest fear. That's the entire point, ... So, I don't know if this guy has actually played Batman Arkham Knight. I don't know if he's only looked at certain parts of the game, and that's why he's just making this very one-dimensional, simple statement as to why Joker's consciousness is manifesting inside of Batman, because apparently it's due to the fear toxin, that Batman actually fears the idea of killing anyone. So that's probably why it manifests itself as Joker. Like, that whole fear of killing is what manifests as Joker. But that's not how Joker is portrayed at all in Batman Arkham Knight. It comes across like Joker's consciousness, like the consciousness that is continuing after the events of Arkham City after he died. It's like that. It's making it seem like Joker's consciousness is living inside of Batman, and the memories that he had from the beginning of Batman's career to Arkham City, and even memories that Batman himself hasn't even witnessed. He hasn't witnessed Joker do certain things, and Joker is literally saying things that Batman has probably never seen before. So it's almost like, in a sense, Joker is alive, but he's alive in a psychological mindscape. That's what that came across as. So it's not the Scarecrow's fear toxin that is contributing to that. If it was Scarecrow's fear toxin, the things that Joker would be saying would be based on things that Batman would actually know. But it's clear, based on certain events that Joker describes, that Batman hasn't witnessed certain events like that, or when he's talking about his private life with Harley or the like, and Batman has never bared any witness to that. Like, that's not a good explanation at all. It's clear that the game wants you to believe it's a Titan-infected blood. And furthermore, there's a whole section after the events of Ace Chemicals, when we first see Joker and he pretends to shoot Batman, where we play as James Gordon, and this is before Batman Arkham Knight. So James Gordon goes into the cell block where Batman is holding those 4 individuals who are turning into Joker, and Batman tells Gordon that there is a empty cell, and Gordon is wondering what that empty cell is for. And Batman mentions it's for someone else, and he doesn't reveal who, but based on what happens in the game, it's clear that it's for Batman. So Batman is well aware that he is going to potentially turn into Joker, and this has nothing to do with Crane's fear toxin. Crane's fear toxin did not exist at this point in the game, because this point in the game takes place before the events of Batman Arkham Knight. So because Batman is of the belief that he will turn into Joker because of what he's witnessed with these individuals infected with Joker's Titan-infected blood, then it's clear that it's not the fear toxin that is contributing to that, it is the Titan-infected blood. So it's not so one-dimensional as this person is implying with his comment. There is actually a bit of depth that is already established at the beginning of the game that implies that it is the Titan-infected blood that is contributing to Joker's consciousness, like the consciousness that is existing after the events of Batman Arkham City, which almost gives the impression that Joker is still alive, but in some kind of mental mindscape somehow. And that is just something that makes literally no sense. And it's just a very cheap form of storytelling just to somehow put in Joker into the game. And I'm going to reiterate once again, it has nothing to do with the fear toxin. The only reason it seems like Joker appears there with the fear toxin is because the fear toxin amplifies the effects of the Titan-infected blood. You even go onto the Wikipedia, and they mention stuff about this. And given that Batman's eyes literally turn green, and we've seen this before with green eyes when it comes to Titan. I mean, Joker's eyes literally turned green when he injected himself with Titan in the events of Batman Arkham Asylum. So Robin acknowledges that Batman's eyes are turning green, and the green eyes is clearly related to Titan, so it's clear that the Titan is what's causing Joker's consciousness to manifest. So that right there is pretty obvious if you actually played through the game, and you actually looked at all of those events closely, and you actually remembered all of them throughout the full game. But apparently in this guy's mind, he didn't consider that, because it's like he didn't play the game, or it's like he totally forgot about that. And again, just the way he phrased his comment, it's almost like he's coming across as a bit of a show-off, and almost like he wants to portray a sense of arrogance, and that's why I'm phrasing my statements the way I am right now, because it seems like he wants to be seen as an asshole. So I'm going to approach him as an asshole. So that right there is just a very odd statement that that guy decided to make on that first video. And it's clear that he's just being a bit of an apologist to Rocksteady, and he likes Batman Arkham Knight a lot, and that's why he's willing to let bygones be bygones, and he's willing to let those kind of cheap shortcuts in storytelling fly. And then the whole part with his comment of, oh, Batman is afraid of killing. Like, where is that really indicated in the games? Like, there's really no indication that Batman is literally afraid of killing. He hates killing. There's a big difference between being afraid to kill and actually, like, hating the whole idea of killing. Like, hatred and fear are two different things entirely. I mean, Scarecrow tries to make them seem like it's the same thing, but it's not true at all. So Batman has a hatred for killing, but not a fear of killing, and this is not properly portrayed in the games. Like, the games have never implied that Batman is afraid of killing. I mean, Arkham Knight tries to make it seem like he's afraid of killing just out of nowhere, but it doesn't really build upon any events that were established in the previous games. There's no sort of moment in the previous games where we literally see Batman, like, looking at his hands or anything, or just having that feeling of shock in his mind when he even contemplates the whole idea of killing that would almost imply he's afraid of killing. That's not indicated at all. There's nothing in the database entries regarding that. Like, you can't immediately imply that Batman is afraid of killing. Like, Scarecrow tries to assume Batman is afraid of killing, but then again, like, in the events of Batman Arkham Knight, Scarecrow has always been very incorrect about the whole idea of Batman. Like, Scarecrow had this hypothesis on Batman, and Batman proved him wrong. I mean, he literally says in a statement when he's in the subway tunnels, when he's trying to locate a Poison Ivy's plant, that he thought that perfectly arranged atoms could generate fear, and that Batman proved him wrong. So Scarecrow has been wrong about Batman so many times, so simply taking Scarecrow's, like, thoughts at face value is not how you want to approach that at all. So immediately implying that Batman is afraid to kill doesn't make any sense. Unless we're talking about something like in Batman the Animated Series, where I recall there is an episode where Scarecrow was the villain, and he created a toxin that didn't create fear, but it actually got rid of it. Or I'm guessing it probably did something akin to dulling the ego so that people were more likely to not really comprehend their own actions. I mean, it was something like that. It was more so that people didn't have any sense of hesitation or fear when performing very dangerous acts. So because of this, they went out and did these acts, and it nearly cost them their lives because these acts were very suicidal in their implementation. And I recall that Batman was exposed to this toxin, and so he became a lot more like brutal to the thugs because nothing was really holding him back. And in a sense, it was almost meant to imply that Batman is afraid to kill. Or maybe it wasn't that, it was probably some other mechanism that gave it that illusion. But you're not factoring in the previous episodes when it comes to interpreting the context in which that whole idea is used. Just because it's used in one episode and it's probably not touched upon in previous episodes doesn't mean it's worth critiquing, because it's a TV series, it's a cartoon series. So obviously there are going to be some inconsistencies like that, where, you know, they're trying to portray an idea in one episode, but in previous episodes this idea wasn't really established. But, you know, like, that's kind of how you were supposed to interpret the episodes of the Batman animated series. They introduced an idea in one episode and they would roll with it, while still maintaining some amount of consistency present in previous episodes. But this whole idea that they were trying to go for, you know, I feel like there was at least some better setup in implying that Batman was afraid to kill, or maybe the mechanism involved gave it that illusion, but not in Batman Arkham Knight. And I've already described in the previous video that it really doesn't make any sense for a blood disease to have any contribution to a change in psychology or the establishment of a consciousness. If we're talking about a neural condition or a change in the neurotransmitters that are being used in the mind, that'd be different. But it's just the idea that somehow a consciousness is able to still reside inside of a blood disease doesn't make any sense in the context of this grounded world that the Batman Arkham series is based on. And I know there's probably some kind of scientific explanation in our world that would indicate why this process would make some kind of sense, but this is a fictional world. I mean, most of the time when writers are designing these fictional worlds, they don't exactly factor in real-world concepts or scientific concepts or like any kind of nuances like that. So if the game didn't properly establish that somehow blood is somehow meant to contain a person's consciousness, then therefore I have to make this kind of critique on this kind of story element for Batman Arkham Knight, and it's a pretty cheap form of storytelling. And to this guy who left that comment in my previous video, is it pretty obvious why I'm making the kind of statements I'm making right now about this whole storyline of Joker's consciousness somehow manifesting inside of Batman's blood when he actually had Joker's blood transferred into himself? It doesn't make any sense in that regard, and it really doesn't serve any purpose. And if you ask me, like, that whole sequence where Batman is dealing with Joker inside of his mind at the end of Batman Arkham Knight, you could have easily done that without having to set up this whole idea of Joker's consciousness somehow manifesting inside of this Titan-infected blood that Batman should have already cured in Batman Arkham City, but apparently not. And it's just a very odd form of storytelling, and it already is part of Batman Arkham Knight's underwhelming story, so that's all I have to say about that particular tangent. But I've taken the time to do some of the side missions with Deadshot, the Identity Thief, and Bane, and also with Mad Hatter, and I'm doing this side mission right here where I'm trying to rescue Nora Freeze from Joker's henchmen. It unlocks after you beat Mr. Freeze in his boss fight. I'm honestly surprised that Batman doesn't just call up Freeze on the radio and just tell him where Nora is. He has to go all the way back to the GCPD building physically in order to actually end the side mission. I find it very odd that they decided to favor that, but whatever. And this combat encounter I did restart a couple of times because of really stupid issues, but it's nothing too bad compared to what I got in the fake Joker fight at the end of the steel mill encounter. That being said, I did include a blooper specific to this combat encounter, and I think I need to discuss an issue real quick that this game has and the other Arkham games have. So, I mentioned before that to do the blade dodge and the blade dodge takedown, it requires holding triangle and then pulling back on the left analog stick. Well, there's actually a problem with that. Because of the way the game prioritizes certain animations, the game actually prioritizes the blade dodge over certain abilities. And when I'm talking about abilities, I'm talking about abilities where triangle is an important input to consider, like when you're doing circle triangle to do the normal takedown, or when you're doing square and triangle in order to do the seek and destroy technique. And there's an issue with that where I'm trying to do the normal takedown or the seek and destroy combo, and because an enemy happens to be attacking me with a blade that requires the blade dodge input, and the blade dodge has more priority than the other abilities, I end up getting cheaply hit by that attack a lot whenever I'm trying to do the normal takedown or the seek and destroy technique, because triangle is an important input to consider with those specific abilities. And when the game gives high priority to the blade dodge rather than the other takedown abilities, you can easily get hit by that, and it's pretty frustrating. Especially during combat encounters where there are so many different weapons that the enemies can use. And to even the playing field, I'm busy trying to use Seek and Destroy to destroy all those weapons. But if an enemy happens to get near me and he does the blade attack, I'm going to get hit, and it just catches me out of nowhere. And it's a minor issue, but it's an issue that can be very, very obnoxious during very big combat encounters, especially with restrictions like what I'm doing with no damage. So bear that in mind when you're dealing with bladed enemies and you're busy trying to use Seek and Destroy in order to destroy a lot of the weapons that the enemies can use in the combat encounter. And speaking of the weapons, there's one weapon that I really hate in particular that the enemies can use, and it's the throwable weapons. Like when enemies pick up chairs, or when they have those propane tanks, or like anything that they can throw. Those weapons hit me more times than any other weapon in the game, because it's so hard to tell if they're attacking you or not, and because they're quite a distance away from you and they're not directly like getting close to you in order to use those throwable weapons, they can catch you off guard a lot of the times. And without the counter indicators to indicate that they're actually throwing the weapons, it's rather obnoxious. And also, I feel like the placement of the active frame period when the enemies are throwing those weapons is a little too early in the animation, because the amount of times I know that there's an enemy with a throwable weapon and I go to attack them with a strike animation and they throw their weapon, and like the amount of frames that they're having to do in order to actually initiate the startup frames for the throwing animation, it feels like it's not a lot of startup frames. And I just feel like the active frame period starts the moment like they're about to throw it, rather than the moment it leaves their hand. And I just feel like it's very easy for the enemies with the throwable weapons to hit you when when you're pretty close to them. And I find it rather obnoxious. That's definitely like the one weapon in the game that really, really pisses me off to no end, and it becomes quite a nuisance compared to the other weapons I've just discussed with the stun rods and the shields. I mean, those are separate issues entirely, but the throwable weapons, I mean, there's a reason why I say you don't want to be stuck in animations, because those throwable weapons, they catch you off guard, and they can easily punish you during animations, and it's obnoxious. But that's all I have to say about that, and we just have this minor Predator encounter right here. And obviously, with these kind of Predator encounters that have snipers, always get rid of the snipers. The snipers are always going to be the most obnoxious enemy, because they just have a gift of spotting you out of nowhere, because their periphery is pretty god tier. And even when the laser's not in your general direction, they just spot you. And by the way, when you're making your way over to the steel mill, there are snipers patrolling, so you've got to glide very carefully when you're getting over here. Remember how I mentioned in the previous video how as the main story progresses, you just deal with so many more gunmen on the rooftops? That's definitely one of the main problems I have with this part of the game. And there were definitely some moments that I had to cut out from this video where I'm trying to do Zaz's side mission of trying to get to a phone before he kills the hostage, and the snipers are active on the map, and the phone is in Joker's steel mill area, so I ended up getting caught by a sniper, and the snipers are so good at shooting you in this game. Even though they take quite a while to shoot, they are pretty good at pinning you down with that laser sight, and if they get that laser on you, you're going to take a lot of damage. It doesn't instantly kill you, but it's still obnoxious either way. And I'm just doing the Predator encounter, and that is the end of it, which I need to talk about. So in Predator encounters, you have this unique option where you can deploy smoke pellets without the need to equip them. So how they work is, when you get spotted by an enemy in a Predator encounter, there will be a heads-up display saying triangle, drop smoke pellet. So you press it, and then you just drop it to the ground, and the enemies will not be able to shoot you when you're inside of the smoke. And that's cool, but there are moments in the open world where the combat scenarios and the Predator scenarios kind of blend together, because you have a combat situation right next to a Predator situation. So there are times where you're in the middle of a combat encounter, But because you're right near a predator encounter, the game can't really differentiate between the proper protocols it's supposed to impose upon the player. So you get the drop smoke pellet option in the middle of combat, and it can be so forceful at times that you'll accidentally drop a smoke pellet when you're trying to do some other animation, like when you're trying to use a quick bat claw, or when you're trying to do a takedown animation, and the game prioritizes the triangle prompt in order to drop the smoke pellet. It's a minor issue, but I thought it was worth discussing because it can be pretty obnoxious at times. And we're just making our way over to this area right here using the new freeze grenade. So the freeze grenade is a gadget that you get once you beat Mr. Freeze. It's like near the end of the game, and the game is still introducing new gadgets. And speaking of which, we'll be introduced to the freeze cluster grenade if you choose to partake in the optional side mission that takes place in this part of the game when you return to the steel mill. Which again, why would they be introducing new gadgets this late into the game? It's like when they introduce shield guys or stun rod guys so late into the game in Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Knight. That's like, why are you putting tutorials here when this should have been something that should have been at the beginning of the game? It's rather funny when you consider it like that. But the freeze grenade will allow you to create rafts, essentially, in the water that will allow you to navigate the environment. And you can also use them to disable steam pipes that will emit very hot steam. And you can also freeze enemies in combat temporarily. It's only one enemy at a time, though. So you can only freeze one enemy at a time in the combat and predator scenarios. And then when you gain access to the freeze cluster grenade, you'll be able to freeze enemies, but it only freezes their legs, so they can still attack you with their weapons. The normal freeze grenade will just freeze them entirely, but it's just one enemy at a time. So it's an interesting balance. So what you want to do with the freeze grenades and predator encounters specifically, I never really find the benefit for them in the combat scenarios, but in the predator encounters, you'll definitely want to freeze enemies that you'll get to later on, or just freeze any annoying threats. Like what I did in that one predator encounter in Wonder City when I was dealing with Joker's henchmen. That's how you'll want to use the freeze grenades. But other than that, I don't really find the freeze grenades to be that useful in the combat scenarios, and I don't really find a lot of purpose for them. I mean, as I play these games, I just end up discovering new things that I really should be experimenting with, like with the Bat Swarm when dealing with the one-armed lieutenant. So hopefully I'll be able to find something interesting that you can do with the freeze grenades. I just wonder how useful the freeze grenades are against the one-armed lieutenants and the Titan henchmen. If they have a lot of utility against those enemies, that'd be great. Because then I can save those annoying enemies for last and actually focus on the real threats, which are the normal henchmen. And yeah, I need to experiment more with that in the future. But yeah, we're just using the freeze grenade here. We're also using the line launcher as well. There are definitely some points where you can use the line launcher just to speed up this whole process of navigating this entire area. Can I just say it's rather annoying when you're forced to come back to these kind of areas that warrant a very slow process to traverse them when you're trying to do Riddler challenges? It's like with the subway area or the Arkham Knight's HQ in Batman Arkham Knight, because there's just a lot of moments where you're forced to do RAM puzzles or you're forced to use the winch on the Batmobile in order to get down a shaft. And you're just having to do a lot of slow things in order to get to these Riddler challenges. And then when you're done with them, you have to backtrack out of there because the game doesn't offer any kind of fast travel option to get out of those interiors. And so you're forced to backtrack in order to get back into the open world. And it just wastes so much time. And these are Riddler challenges in areas that only warrant going to them once. And I've definitely included some video clips discussing this, and I'm going to be including them in my annoying/dumb/weird moments video series for Batman Arkham, because I feel like they're worth talking about, because I really don't understand what Rocksteady was thinking when implementing these challenges. But we now have a Predator encounter right here, and I'm going to be using a variation of Batman Arkham Video's strategy for this sequence, but he would always wait until that guy right over there would just go near the mine, and then he would actually do the strategy you're going to be seeing right here. But I'm just going to do a silent takedown on this guy, and I'm just going to use the remote-controlled Batarang in order to knock this guy into the hole over there in the stairs. And I'm going to make sure I accelerate the Batarang in order to knock him in there. But the enemies are going to be investigating that guy, and this is where I should have been using my smoke pellet to deal with those enemies investigating the body, rather than doing this. Because what happens next is kind of a happy accident. Because what I'm trying to do right here is I'm trying to deal with that guy using the back claw, and he doesn't get knocked out, but he conveniently lands on the mine, so I'm able to use the disruptor to detonate the mine. This guy ends up coming as well, so I'm just going to pull him off, and he gets pulled off. And look at that. I've never seen the back claw have that much range. That was a happy accident right there. This guy's investigating, and I pull him off. And I'm going to be able to take out the other guy. Yeah, this was all just a happy accident. Not exactly the most consistent strategy, but it was still fun nonetheless. And I find it really stupid that Batman Arkham Knight removed the whole ability to pull enemies off of ledges. When the enemy is set up in a position that they don't necessarily have to be in, I should be rewarded for using my Batclaw or my Batarang to actually knock off the enemy. But apparently, in their eyes, they viewed it as being too overpowered, yet did you see me use such a method in Batman Arkham Asylum's Predator encounters? I was mainly using the explosive gel. And I've barely been using the Batclaw as it is in some of the Predator encounters for Batman Arkham City. And I could have been using other methods. Like, why do you take away a creative design like that? And it's probably because, they don't want to make it seem like the thugs are dying from the falls. But there are just some falls where it isn't possible for the thugs to die, yet I'm going to be using my Batarang or my Batclaw to pull the enemies or push the enemies like off those ledges, and they just don't fall off because there's an invisible barrier blocking it. And even when I'm using the glide kick, or when I'm using the kinetic shockwave that is generated by the dive bomb, or like other methods for knocking off enemies, they just don't get knocked off, even when the distance they're gonna drop is very little. So Rocksteady's reasoning for that for Batman Arkham Knight is rather dumb, and it makes the Predator encounters lack a certain flavor to them, when they're just not gonna encourage that level of creativity with the Predator encounters or with the gadgets. But here's Harley Quinn. You can choose to go for this if you want to. I haven't really found a utility for the freeze cluster grenade. Maybe it's useful in the combat scenarios, but my main problem with the cluster grenades or with the smoke pellets, if you use them in combat, or like with the explosive gel in Batman Arkham Knight when you use it as a quickfire gadget, is when you stun the enemies and they're busy just swiping at thin air, they're doing it independent of what you're doing. And they're not following the protocols that they're supposed to be following when you go into animations that are supposed to turn off the enemy AI. Like, they're able to attack you in those animations, and it's something you notice a lot in Batman Arkham Asylum when the Titan henchman omnisciently knows where you are when he's just swiping at thin air, and he hits you during takedown animations or any kind of animation that's supposed to give you a sense of immunity to the enemies. And when you're putting the enemies into a very similar state like that with smoke pellets or with other gadgets that cause them to do independent animations that don't follow the paired animation nature that this game favors, it can be very problematic, and I don't favor that whatsoever. So that's why I don't really have a lot of utilities for the freeze cluster grenade. But that doorway right in front of me is where you can go access the freeze cluster grenade, which I'll never use, and I probably won't even use them in Batman Arkham Knight as well. But it's near the end of the game, and this is a side mission in the steel mill. I'll just showcase where it is in case you want to go and get them. But during this time, I'm just going to talk about the annoying combat encounter coming up with Fake Joker. And I really do consider it to be the most annoying combat encounter in the game, because it's really the one combat encounter where they really try to mix things up with the enemies. I mean, there aren't any armored enemies. There are just normal henchmen that have access to all sorts of weapons, like the stun rod, shields, blades, and throwable weapons. And then you have the one-armed lieutenant, and then the Titan henchman. And it's a fun encounter. I really want to like it, but it's so easy for the fundamental problems of Batman Arkham City to get in the way of a really fun fight. And given the number of enemies that you're dealing with, there are so many moments where Batman will prioritize the wrong guy. There are just moments where you'll hit the wrong enemy, and you're in the middle of animations, and then the one-armed lieutenant will just punish you for doing certain animations, like the counter animations. And then I even had some weird bugs with that particular combat encounter. Like, I somehow had a moment where I was in the middle of beating down the one-armed lieutenant, and then I ended up getting slammed into the ground from nothing. An invisible weapon somehow slammed me into the ground, as if somehow, at the point at which I was doing the beatdown on the one-armed lieutenant, he was supposed to be doing his slam, but because his animation wasn't registered by the game correctly, he was not doing anything, and I was supposed to be dodging a slam of his that didn't show up on the screen. I don't know why I had that weird issue. I saved it as a blooper, not in this video, but I'm saving it for the dumb slash annoying slash weird moments of the Batman Arkham series video. But it's so odd how I could be encountering this kind of issue. And, you know, the fact that these kind of issues are even apparent in this combat encounter is definitely the main reason why I would consider it to be the most annoying combat encounter in the game. And like I said before, I had to re-record this entire section in order to make it look better and to actually demonstrate some of the new strategies that I found for some of the enemy types. And this is the only time in the game that I think I'll be doing this, with actually showcasing a new strategy that I found after this walkthrough amidst the old strategies that I found for this walkthrough. But the fight begins now, and all you gotta do here is just beat up Joker, or fake Joker in this case, and then the enemies will spawn in. And you're going to be seeing a black screen here, because this indicates I restarted the checkpoint, and this is me spamming the evade button to make sure I'm not getting attacked during that black screen, because I mentioned many times that restarting the checkpoints on this game presents with the whole problem where the video doesn't load correctly. Like, the world is loaded, but the video hasn't loaded yet, so you're vulnerable during that black screen moment, which is rather obnoxious, so just spam evade. But this is where I'm going to try to make sure that I'm destroying as many weapons as possible, but the one-armed lieutenant has spawned in. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to try to use my batarangs in order to increase my combo to the gold threshold. And the moment I get to the gold threshold, I'm going to use the bat swarm to stun the one-armed lieutenant as well as any other enemies that happen to get stunned by the bat swarm. And I'm going to make sure I do the cape stun after this, because the number of times I press the strike button after doing the bat swarm and Batman prioritizes the wrong guy, or he ends up doing an unfavorable strike animation that is just slow enough to allow an enemy to hit me. It's happened too much to me. And another good thing about doing the cape stun after the bat swarm is that after you do the cape stun, Batman immediately goes into the active frame period of initiating the beatdown, rather than wasting time doing a slow strike and then doing the beatdown. So that's another good thing about doing the cape stun after that. Sometimes it doesn't work though, because Batman can still prioritize the wrong guy with the cape stun, but the cape stun can stun multiple enemies, and since you're already doing one specific animation, because there's only one specific cape stun animation that is specific to close range, it's easy to gauge where you're supposed to aim so that you can make sure that you're hitting the one-armed lieutenant. But the Titan henchman has spawned in, and since I was in free flow focus, I was able to use the explosive gel to stun this guy and immediately put him into the ultra stun. The bat swarm can stun the Titan henchman, but it doesn't put him into an ultra stun. It puts him into a partial stun that just allows you to do a 3-hit combo on them. It's the same 3-hit combo from Batman Arkham Asylum, and it serves absolutely no purpose in Batman Arkham City. I don't even think it contributes to damage on the Titan Henchman. I think the only way to finish off Titan Henchmen is to initiate the beatdown on them. And I think the only reason that animation exists with the Bat Swarm, where you just put him into that partial stun, is to allow you to get an opportunity to just hit him with the Ultra Stun. And also, when you do the third Cape Stun that triggers the Ultra Stun, the enemies will actually stop attacking you for a bit. So the attack animations that the enemies do, the moment you go into the Ultra Stun, they'll stop what they're doing. And this gives you a breather for about a second to actually initiate the Ultra Stun. And remaining in free flow focus is pretty helpful when trying to do the Ultra Stun. But yeah, see that? I knocked down all those enemies, and because this game doesn't have any sort of way to actually deal with enemies on the ground aside from using the ground finish, I lost my combo. Like, I was forced to use nothing but the ground finish this time, but there was still one enemy active, and because I was still trying to survey the surroundings, I surveyed my surroundings too long, and I lost my combo. I don't really understand why it took Rocksteady so long to finally give you the ability to do strike animations on enemies that are on the ground, because knocking down enemies, especially a multitude of enemies at once, is something that you can do in Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and in Arkham Origins, and given how prevalent those kind of scenarios are, you'd think it would actually cross their mind to put in a way to actually attack enemies on the ground without having to be so reliant upon the ground finish. And they finally did this with Batman Arkham Knight, so it really confuses me. And then that blooper you saw just then was me trying to do a takedown on the guy, but the blade dodge had more priority, so I accidentally did the blade dodge, and I wasn't expecting it, so I wasn't able to dodge the remaining attacks, which is really dumb. I'm not a big fan of that at all. I mean, it might seem like a minor issue, but when it happens so often during combat encounters involving lots of enemies and multiple weapons, it really feels like a major issue with the game. And that is the end of this video, so stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.